Hello, I'm James, amateur radio call sign WA7JNJ here in Marysville at Jennings Park during the last few days of 2022, and wanted to do a quick overview video of some of the things that I've learned and places I've explored this year. Learning and exploring is a highlight of this channel, and I had fun making a video last year, so thought I'd do one again for 2022. While I didn't get out to activate as many summits or parks this year due to being sick, some during the summer, and vehicle issues, I did get to a few parks this year, mostly with summits on the air, and then also explored a few local parks for the first time. Bayview State Park was a great windy afternoon, but cold and fun to get out. I've wanted to activate Deception Pass State Park from Goose Rock, and that was a gorgeous afternoon to spend a few hours with my 100-watt radio. It was also fun to get to Kama Beach State Park for the first time and play with a random wire antenna and make contacts on some bands that I don't usually make contacts on. For summits on the air, it was the least amount of summits I've done in the 4 years I've been activating, but was fun to make a few milestones. Finally halfway to the GOAT of 1,000 points, so I got a little over 500 points this year. Did activate my 100th unique summit at McMurray Benchmark. It was fun to make my longest VHF contact this year, a little over 273 miles with Tim N7KOM. He was on Mary's Peak, middle part of Oregon, using an MFJ Long Ranger antenna, and I was on Devil's Mountain, which is not a very tall mountain, but using my FT3DR and elk log periodic antenna. So moving into some of the things that I learned this year, the first thing is a safety item. I was hiking up to Tiger Mountain and ran into a bear for the first time. And glad I saw it in enough time. It did sit there and watch me for a while. There were things that I did right, and I stayed as calm as I could. I faced the bear, I made some noise. I got my bear spray. The things that I didn't do well was my bear spray was in my pack, and so it was not easily accessible. I did have to take off my pack, and you really should keep your pack on if you're around a bear for safety if it does attack you. And then ultimately I did end up keep hiking and walked past where the bear had been. I'd been taking a day off of work, and it was my backup hike, and I just wanted to finish the hike. So probably not the safest thing to do, but especially since I saw another bear on the way back. A lot closer, but I surprised it and it did run off. So some of the things to learn, the very next day I did go out and buy new bear spray. I do always have bear spray in my pack. I had it for about 3 years, and it's always good to refresh yours every couple of years. The aerosol does go bad and it won't spray as far and is not as effective. So good reminder to check your bear spray and maybe get some new spray if you haven't already. Another safety item this year was regarding vehicles. I was driving up to Evergreen Mountain for the first time. It was about 19 miles in on the forest road, the last 7 or so, which were pretty narrow and a little bit rougher, and my brakes locked up. And I tried to move the vehicle, but they were locked up, and when I was trying to move the vehicle, it was sliding a little bit towards the edge of the steep side of the mountain there. So with the brakes locked up and blocking the road, tried to figure out what to do. I did have a little bit of cell signal, but it was very faint, enough to call and reach out to some resources and get some help. I will say I was surprised how expensive it is to get towing. If they are able to even get you. I was thankful for Jason from the Washington Off-Road Recovery Network, who did come out to help me, and then also my cousin who came out. And so after 6 hours of blocking the road, I was able to break the brake cable. We drove it back down, unwrapped the cable, made sure the brakes were okay, and I was able to drive home safely the rest of that day. So know some of the resources that are available in your area. In Washington State, Washington Off-Road Recovery is one tool if the tow trucks can't help you. Having repeaters on your radios, if you have APRS on your radio, knowing how to use that. and just having tools available to make sure you're safe when you're exploring mountain roads. The primary radios that I've used for summits on the air have been the Yaesu FT70 and then last year the FT3DR. And so I had used the Baofeng twice when I very first started activating, and then also last year I knew that it didn't hear as well as the nicer radios. I wanted to see if there were some other lower cost but quality options in radios, and so I bought the ICOM V86 and used that on a few summits this year, and then also the Yaesu 65, which only used once, so didn't get as much experience with the 65. Initial impressions on the Yaesu radio is that it felt nice, the quality of the radio was great. I like that it's got both VHF and UHF, and was able to use it on Tiger Mountain for the first time. I've heard some good feedback from a couple other activators that use it locally and that the filtering is better than a Baofeng. I'd like to get a little bit more experience and try it out and compare before I give a strong recommendation of that. I did really like the ICOM V86. It's got a good rating for weather. It's rugged. It's 7 watts. It is a single band or a VHF only radio, but most of the summits on the air that people do, they'll do VHF or 2 meter only, so it could be a good option for you there. It did hear very well for me. It is direct conversion, so the quality of the receive is not as good as a super heterodyne radio like the FT70 or other more expensive radios, but it did hear almost as well in the very quick testing I did as the FT3DR. I was on Kameno Island Summit, and there was a station that was in the noise. I couldn't quite make out the words with the ICOM V86, but was able to make it out with the FT3DR. So it doesn't hear probably quite as well, but it's really close, and for most everything that you're doing, I really like the ICOM V86. It is simple and just a good radio to use. What I don't like is when I do like using multiple bands, so having a single band radio is a drawback for me. But the only other real thing is the monitor button you have to push when you're changing the squelch, which you do a couple times when you're on a summit to hear faint signals. It's a small button to push and things when you're turning the squelch down. So that was the main drawback. It only also has 5 digits when you're recording memories. So that's annoying, but not a huge drawback for me. So overall, a good radio and fun to try out some lower cost but quality radios this year. This year I learned the importance of having a 2 meter bandpass filter in your kit when you're doing a summit on the air activation. I finally purchased one this year, the SOTA Beam's 2 meter bandpass filter, and used it on Devil's Mountain. And I know I've had interference there before, and so thought it would be a great summit to try it on. When I got to the summit, I heard a few summit stations out there wanted to make a quick summit to summit contact and didn't have the bandpass filter set up. I barely heard the summit to summit stations, was able enough to get the contact, and then finally took the time to include the bandpass filter and set that up, and then was able to hear the station very clearly. So highly recommend having a filter. I did use it a couple other times when I was getting some radio interference, some NOAA weather station interference. And sometimes you know you're getting interference, and there's other times I don't think you always can tell, but having that tool when you're on the summit and you have interference or there's towers around is a great option and something for your toolkit. I don't really ever plan to hike in the dark, but this year did hike halfway back in the dark from Thunder Knob and realized it was time to upgrade my headlamp. The Petzl Tika Plus 2 had been a good light. I liked the beam on it, but I realized I'd purchased it about 9 years ago and just not up to speed with some of the newer lights out there. So after my son purchased the Black Diamond headlamp, I realized I should pick one of those up, and grateful he got one for me for Christmas. It's the Black Diamond 350 spot, and really like the brighter beam on it, and also it has a broad spread when you're hiking down the trail as well. So grateful to get a new headlamp. It's one of those really important things you got to keep in your pack, even if you hopefully never have to use it or don't plan to hike in the dark. I do also keep another light with me. It's usually a AAA battery, so it uses the same batteries as my main light. Although I've also been using an O light, or have kept that in there as well. So always have at least 2 lights with you, and make sure you have a good headlamp. It's really important in case you do ever have to hike back in the dark. So I got my amateur radio license just a couple years ago and have not experienced the uptick of a solar cycle. So one thing I learned this year is just the excitement of making contacts on bands that I don't normally make contact on, and getting a lot further distances. And so from St. Edward State Park for the 10-meter ARRL contest, making 51 contacts in Brazil, Argentina, Costa Rica, all these great places, was a blast. Also from Kama Beach State Park, I used a random wire antenna and made contacts on quite a few other bands with Japan and others. So looking forward to the next year of trying some new bands, and just not doing 20-meter and kind of the standard bands that I've done in the past. My first year of YouTube, I used my phone for making video, and so in February this year I was excited to upgrade and get the new GoPro and use that this year. A lot smoother video, higher quality, and allowed me to use my phone for doing spots and other things while I was activating for summits on the air. So definitely enjoyed learning and using that this year. I will say I was surprised how often it seems to crash, and I have to take the battery out to get it to restart. But overall, have really enjoyed using it for my activation videos. I've also been looking at 360 cameras for a while, and was excited when the new Insta360 came out. And so finally did purchase that. And I really enjoyed learning how to use that. It does add extra steps to the editing process. But it gives some unique views and fun ways to experience the hike, and try and share those with you, the viewer. Most of my videos have been activation videos for summits on the air, parks on the air, but I was glad to get some videos focused on newer Summit on the Air activators, and I am looking forward to finishing that up over the next few months. Thank you for those who did subscribe to my channel this year, who liked videos or commented on them. I don't like asking for those kinds of things, but definitely have appreciated it when you have liked or commented, and thank you for all the new subscribers. It's hard to believe another year has passed, and as we look into the new year, let's keep learning and finding new places to explore. Thanks again for watching, and 73 from WA7 J&J.